Wes Anderson is one of the most well-known and respected directors around. His creative and instantly recognisable directorial style shines through in all of his movies, whether it be the way he lines up a shot, the colours he uses, or the costumes and props that fill every scene of his films. This Andersonian mood is what makes Wes Anderson films so special. The Andersonian mood has taken Wes Anderson the duration of his directing career to carefully improve and establish, and has led to him becoming one of the most popular directors of modern times. Whitney Dilly argues that no American director has a more recognisable aesthetic, consistent thematic style, or even a stronger authorial voice than Wes Anderson. The idea that a director can have an authorial voice over a film relates back to the auteur theory. The auteur theory refers to the way that a director is the author of the film. This authorial voice is seen as the director's artistic vision, which contains recognisable, recurring themes and visual cues which show a consistent artistic identity throughout various works by the director. One of the easiest ways to recognise a film directed by Wes Anderson is to pay attention to the different ways colour is used throughout his films. Colour is an important part in most films. This is because of the way colour can make us feel and resonate. In the early days of cinema, colour was used to exaggerate the difference between our reality and film. This is because film had become the pinnacle of escapism, with colour being a perfect way of enhancing that feeling of escapism. Different colours elicit different psychological responses. For example, the colour red provokes feelings of energy, power and even rage, whereas blue can draw out feelings of peace and tiredness. Wes Anderson understands colour theory better than most, as he puts multiple theories and ideas into practically every scene. Different colours can harmonise together based on their position in the colour wheels. For example, colours that are opposite each other on the colour wheel, like red and cyan, complement each other. There are many ways colours can harmonise based on their position in the colour wheel. Another way this can happen is by using a monochromatic harmony. This is when three different tones and tints of the same colour are used to easily create a harmonious look. A great example of Wes Anderson understanding this idea is throughout Fantastic Mr. Fox. Various tones and tints of orange are visible throughout the film. He does this for two different reasons. The first being because of his deep understanding of colour harmonies, in particular the monochromatic harmony. The second reason is because it fits into the narrative of the film. Fantastic Mr. Fox is obviously about Mr. Fox, who is an orange animal, and the film is set in autumn. This works well as it helps build a world where Mr. Fox belongs. He's the main character of the film, and by making the film's visual consistent with the colours of the main character, Wes Anderson makes the film feel like it is Mr. Fox's movie. This then benefits the film because the audience can easily get invested in Mr. Fox and enjoy his story even more. As previously mentioned, films are used as a form of escapism, a way to avoid the stress of the real world. Wes Anderson knows this very well and intentionally distances his movies from reality. He does this in various ways. For example, Monsieur Gustave in the Grand Budapest Hotel has a very interesting personality that would never fit into the real world due to his many quirks and funny mannerisms. Another way that Wes Anderson separates his films from reality is through the choices of colours in a scene. He very rarely ever uses ordinary colours like blue, red or pink. It's usually a slight variation of the colour. For example, in the Grand Budapest Hotel, in the scene inside the Mendel's truck, the Mendel's boxes are not pink and Zero's outfit is not blue. Instead, the boxes are closer to a salmon colour than pink, and Zero's outfit is more of a sky blue shade. Bellantoni suggests that filmmakers should not choose colours for their films solely based on intellectual or abstract notions. They discuss this because it is possible for audiences to react in unwanted ways to colours. For example, someone could interpret blue as melancholy instead of a source of hope. Anderson's deviation from these standard colours helps him avoid these unwanted reactions. This is because by using specific hues and saturations, it is easier to create a colour that draws on specific emotions instead of using a broad range and hoping for one result. This stylistic choice also adds towards Wes Anderson's authorial style, making his film more recognisable and supporting the ideas of the auteur theory. Costume design is a powerful storytelling device. There are many ways costumes are used to further a narrative or develop a character. A way that Wes Anderson uses costume is to provide context for a character. In The Royal Tenenbaums, Chaz Tenenbaum is frequently seen in his bright red tracksuit that he also makes his children wear. Wes Anderson is clever when deciding how to dress his characters, and he dresses Chaz in this way for a few reasons. The first reason being is that it's odd to be wearing a full brightly coloured tracksuit almost all of the time, which fits Chaz's character well as he has many interesting personality traits. The second reason is that the bright red colour of the tracksuit gives us information about Chaz's personality. Bright reds can provoke feelings of anger, energy and determination, which fit Chaz's very intense nature. The final reason Anderson dresses Chaz in red is the same reason he dresses lots of his characters in the same colour. It's to show that they have trauma that they are trying to overcome. For Chaz, this trauma is the abuse he suffered from as a child by his father and that his wife died in a plane crash. Another example of this is Anthony Adams in Bottle Rocket and Steve Zissou in The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, who are both often seen wearing red. Additionally, Wes Anderson has a habit of using a high saturation to make primary colours stand out more. By making the red worn by these characters highly saturated, Wes Anderson expresses the importance of that character. This makes the audience able to invest in these characters more easily, which improves the overall experience of watching his movies. Colour transitions are often used in films to show the development of a character or a story. Wes Anderson uses colour transitions in many of his films. In Isle of Dogs, Chief, the leader of the pack of dogs that the story follows, undergoes a colour transition that represents his growth as a character. Throughout most of the film, Chief is very anti-human and refuses to allow Atari to groom him even though his friends had all been groomed and they'd enjoyed it. This is because Chief blames humans for the dogs being banished to Trash Island. However, after he's spent more time around Atari, he eventually allows him to wash and groom him. It then turns out Chief did not have black fur, but white fur with black spots. This colour transition is very sudden, which is unusual as most colour transitions are very gradual, occurring slowly along the progression of the film's narrative. Another way that Wes Anderson uses colour transitions is to show the shift in a narrative's tone. In Moonrise Kingdom, the film becomes less saturated and much darker and dingier when the storm reaches the island. This happens once the storm is in full swing. This is to show the change in the tone of the film. It goes from a childlike interpretation of romance and becomes more dangerous, with Troop 55 trying to capture Sam and Susie once again. This is emphasised even more near the end of the film, when Sam and Susie are climbing up the bell tower. The palette of the film is transformed into a deep, cold and frightening blue. By colouring this scene in blue, Wes Anderson makes use of the complementary colour harmony, which creates a high contrast in comparison to the various cheerful yellow tints and tones that fill the majority of Moonrise Kingdom. Wes Anderson also chooses this dark and ominous blue to emphasise the danger in the scene. The lack of brightness in the scene tells the audience to feel on edge and scares us into thinking that Sam and Susie could die. To summarise, Wes Anderson is a director whose carefully curated authorial style has made him one of the most recognisable directors of modern times. This Andersonian mood that he's created is instantly recognisable through the many ways colour is implemented and intertwined into every scene and every shot. Whatever the reason for choosing a specific colour, whether it be because of his understanding of psychological responses to colours, to represent trauma in a character, or even just to show that a dog has grown closer to a human being, Anderson succeeds in strengthening his authorial voice and the aesthetic of his films. When considering all the different uses Wes Anderson has for colour in his films, it is no wonder why his films, more often than not, look like a technicolor dreamland of creativity, heart and soul.